Robert and Kris, part 2. When we last left off, we kind of talked about the family business that Robert Kardashian's family had that gained them a majority of their wealth, and at the same time also changed the trajectory of Robert Kardashian's life, which happened around high school. And speaking of high school, Robert Kardashian was named Best All Around as his class superlative. He was on the honor roll, a member of multiple clubs, one of those clubs being, actually take a guess. He was a cheerleader. I had no fucking idea. Robert was also elected student body president, and all of his friends around this time report that Robert was super social and was friends with everybody, especially people on the football team, which actually checks out later with his friendship with O.J. Simpson. And it was also reported that when he was in high school and in college, that Robert was like the football manager, which his friends described as basically a glorified water boy. And he did that just so like he could kick it with the football team. Like that was just his crew. A lot of his friends too even admit that they think Robert was hanging out with these types of people for his social standing. Once again, that's always seemed to be a priority for Robert and the rest of his family. But it just seems all around, Rob Kardashian was a very loved person, had a lot of friends, was very intelligent, and was involved in a lot of activities, including being in charge of his entire senior class as the president. Then in 1961, Robert Kardashian would graduate from Susan Miller Dorsey High School. Now, I want to touch on this really quick because shortly after, it does say that Robert did enlist for the draft, which I was surprised by because I had never heard that was a career path that he was interested in taking. Well, here's the tea. Robert did enlist in the draft, but this was in 1961, and that's when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. So most of his peers registered for the draft as well. But even though Robert enlisted, Robert was 4F, which means he was unfit for service. And the reason why is actually kind of foreshadowing in a way. It was due to Robert having acid reflux to the point where his esophagus would close up and he would have a hard time swallowing. And when I heard that, I immediately just thought about the latter part of his life when he had esophageal, I can't say that word, but esophageal cancer. And it sounds like that was the same symptoms he was having back then too. I don't know if the two are related, but that's pretty interesting. Anyway, moving on. He obviously did not go that career path. Instead, Robert enrolled in college. Robert would go on to attend the University of Southern California, and he graduated in 1966. But while he was there is when he actually met O.J. Simpson, who would be one of his lifelong best friends until Nicole's murder in 1994. And we're going to get into all that. But like I said, I think the reason that they met and formed a friendship is because Robert he was the football manager at the University of Southern California as well. And of course, O.J. Simpson played football. His friends said around this time that not only were Robert and O.J. friends, but they were practically brothers. And that it would be a trio of Robert Kardashian, his brother Tom, and O.J. Simpson. And they were just locked at the hip, all three of them. And they would be for the next 20 to 30 years. Now, while their trio was going on, that is when Tom Kardashian was in the middle of being investigated by the FBI. And like I said in the last part, due to Tom's involvement with the bribery and the corruption of the family business, this really turned off Robert Kardashian, and he decided to do his own thing and not partake in the family business. So shortly after graduating college, Robert would go to study law at San Diego School of Law, and of course, he graduated. And after graduating, Robert would immediately start working at an Armenian-American based law firm, which was located in Beverly Hills. And that's when Robert would start practicing law, and he would work at this job for several years, well into his marriage with Kris later. But I also want to clear up a common misconception that I had, so maybe you guys have it as well. While being a lawyer, Robert was not doing the type of work that he would do with his best friend OJ later on when he was helping him defend himself in his murder trial. But that's not really what Robert did in the 60s, 70s. Robert actually just handled mostly routine business stuff. And not to spoil it, but later on it actually would become kind of mundane and boring for Robert because it was such a just like a repetitive thing. It was nothing compared to the O.J. Simpson case that would happen in the 90s. But yeah, just want to make that distinction really quickly while we're talking about Robert Kardashian's early career in law specifically. Now, while Robert was working at this law firm, he was living with his brother Tom. And they were living in a house. I think it's called like Cedar Drive is how Kris Jenner refers to it in her memoir later. But it was this big, amazing, beautiful mansion with a tennis court, a pool. Like, they were wealthy. And they just kind of lived there together. It was kind of like a bachelor pad for the two of them. And OJ would consistently like kind of crash on their couch a lot. Because at this time, OJ Simpson was married to his first wife. And both Kris and Robert admit many times that OJ was like super unfaithful, was always cheating on his wife, and she was always getting angry at him and kicking him out, as she should, meaning he was staying at Tom and Robert's house. So it was basically the three of them's house. And I know you're probably like, okay, relevancy. This is all setting up the stage for when Robert Kardashian meets Kris Jenner and how all of these dynamics will play into when Kris Jenner enters his life. So all you got to know right now is that's where Robert's at personally in his life. Just working, living with his brother, living that bachelor lifestyle. It's the early 70s. Also around this time, Robert would become a born-again Christian. He started praying daily, carrying his Bible with him everywhere. I know I keep saying this, but he was very impacted by Tom's involvement to the point where he completely wanted to turn over a new leaf and do everything in his power to not go down that path, including turning his life over to Christ and becoming a God-fearing man, which even to this day, his children, specifically Chloe, I've heard on her podcast, she always praises him for his religion and his devotion to being a Christian. Basically, he was about that life. And honestly, it seems like everything is going amazing in Robert Kardashian's life. The only thing that seems to be missing, though, is somebody to share his life with. And that's perfect timing because around this time is when he would meet Kris Jenner. However, there was a little issue. A Kris girl, she was already with somebody else. And she may have cheated on that somebody else with Robert. I don't know. We'll talk about it in the next part.